Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. And in a week where the little storm that could, Storm Darragh, not only knocked out a full schedule of top flight games, but caused such a mini commotion it could now impact how the league deals with potent weather in the future. With no games, we have a special for you this week, the now annual team of the season so far. We go behind the stats to pick an Irish League 11 of the best performing players of the campaign after the halfway mark. Where we're going, we don't need strict adherence to positions on your latest weekly edition, Storm or Not, of Kicking Match. My guests this week are two gentlemen that would require a double red weather warning to not appear on the podcast. It's the home team. They are the duo who are part of the Around the Grounds NI collective. First, and I always try and swap this round each time they're on, it's Ross Welsh.
Good evening, Peter.
Hello. And then his partner in crime and other things, it's Joe McCallion.
Great to be here, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Fellas, we have news. And we is the key word there. You all know, 2025, it's fast approaching, right around the corner, and that will mark my fourth calendar year doing this podcast. I'm right slap bang in the middle of the third season or third campaign of Irish League football that I've covered. And look, the podcast has went from strength to strength. The very first one to now, obviously I hit 100 episodes this year. Spotify Wrapped was just a really nice indicator of where we've gone in the past 12 months. Lots of new listeners, lots of new followers, all that. And look, I often think about that first kind of summer when I decided to do this and how totally spooked I was about the idea of just giving it a go and how it all could have fallen apart and all that type of stuff. And sometimes I think you just got to do something that somewhat freaks you out, kind of scares you a touch. And going into the new year, I feel like I need to do that again. It's a good time to do that again, even though, it's scary, obviously. So 2025, I'm going to take a leap. And that is on Friday, the 21st of March, next year, in Belfast, at Pug Uglies, I'm going to host my very first Kicking Match live. A bespoke live podcast, which very much encapsulates what this podcast has been for 100 and whatever episodes. You guys, Around the Grounds, Ross and Joe, you're going to be a key part of this with me. It's going to be a great collaboration between us all. And it's pretty much what it says on the tin. It's not going to be a recording of a podcast that will come out next few days afterwards. It's going to be its own unique show, and being a part of the audience really will add to the whole thing. I really want to put something like this together. I've been thinking about it for a while, weeks and months. I've bit the bullet. I've booked the room. Here we go.
Bring it on. Having to keep it a secret for the last week or so, or weeks or so. It's been tough, but it's good to say it's out there now, and we're both really looking forward to it.
I'm so excited about this. I just think the medium of having people in the room, I enjoy thinking of little creative things to do in this podcast every week. I'm putting together in front of an audience. I think it's going to be really unique, really special, and it's that time of year where you're buying other people gifts. Maybe now's the time to give yourself a gift out there. It's going to be, you two are going to be a part of it. I'm also going to have maybe the odd little special guest you guys do or don't know about, but tickets are available right now. So if you're listening to this podcast, as soon as it comes out, you're one of the first people to know about it. You can go run on to the social media pages. You'll be able to find it in the bio, a link to the ticket through Eventbrite. It's being ran directly myself, so it's all pretty much just to cover costs of renting the room and all the rest, but it's a unique thing to do. I have no clue how it's going to come across, gentlemen, but we're going to have fun along the way is the goal, I'd say.
Absolutely. Can't wait for it.
So that's that. March 21st, 2025, upstairs, Pug Uglies, the very first Kicking Match live. And we'll see how that goes. I don't want to say tickets are limited, go get them now, but they are. So, make me smile, have a stress-free Christmas by getting them in nice and early. But let's look at what's happened this week, as we always do. And it's a weird one because there was 0 games. We thought they were counting down from 6 to 5 to 4, and then there was none. But that was okay. We weren't panicking because we'd already penciled in this episode of our team of the season so far, half season team of the season, all that stuff. So we're going to get to that. But the reason why all those games were called off is something we need to talk about. Storm Darragh had its way with the shores of Northern Ireland, Wales, and across the British Isles and Ireland. And I think many people even talked to me going up to about Friday or so saying, are those games actually going to be played? And my response to non-footballos, yeah, until it's cancelled. And we got to Saturday morning, and all of a sudden, all the trains and buses were pretty much called off. If you're trying to get to an airport through public transport, don't know how that went for you. And slowly but surely, we saw these match postponements. We saw these pitch inspections, and usually when there's bad weather, like there was, and there was an orange weather warning, to be fair, in Northern Ireland, it's the pitch that goes down. It's not commonly this health and safety thing, which came up time and time again this weekend. Fellas, I don't know what your aims or plans for the weekend were, but were you aiming to go to a game that was then called off?
Yeah, so our plan was to head down to Dungannon Linfield, which, as is kind of been big in the news at the time, was probably the first one that really got a lot of kickback when it was cancelled. So with other games being cancelled before that, there was nothing said about this match, so we just assumed it was going ahead, and then fairly last minute was when the news came through.
NIFL have received a lot of flack from fans and actually from players and clubs and club officials, and you can just tell that by what you've seen online. A lot of this is stemmed from the fact that the games were being called off so late in the day. The other hand of this, of course, is and NIFL have rightfully pointed this out, or Jed Lawler has rightfully pointed this out in interviews, that if they called it all off on Friday night or Saturday morning and come 2:30, the sun was in the sky and it was beach weather, people would be looking around going, why did they jump the gun? Surely this is what all these last minute checks are for. I think we've all seen in our time matches getting called off maybe 2 hours, 90 minutes. Sometimes we've been on the road looking to go to games and we're being told it's waterlogged, ain't happening. And sometimes they leave it late to try and push forward and get this game going where maybe water that's lying could drain away, the weather could calm itself down, and that seemed to be the plan. And the first game to go down was at 10:30, Glentoran against Ballymena, and that was quite a clean one, wasn't it? Said the pitch wasn't playable, the oval has form for this, we move on. And the one that caught my eye was at Loughgall, because I was supposed to be going to Loughgall, Larne. And at 11:15, there was a pitch inspection. Sat tight, fingers crossed. Everything was fine. Great. We're all going to go ahead. So it was on, and then it was definitely on. And then come 12:15, it was off. And it wasn't the second one to go. Glenavon Crusaders was the second game to go at 11:20. So these games started to drop out like flies. And the thing that was being put out to the public was that match off, and I would say something akin to risk of health and safety of fans, safety of fans, that's an issue here. Which is not something I would recall being a thing before, which was confusing a lot of people. Eventually, Cliftonville Carrick went at 1:30. There was an issue with the stadium that was quite close to the 3 p.m. kickoff. Dungannon Linfield was the one. And you got to think about my colleagues at Sports Sound. 10 minutes to 2. And the only game they have in the Premiership, the big one with Linfield and Dungannon, is then called off, and you've got a whole programme to fill with 0 top flight games in your 3 o'clock window. Fans weren't happy. Like I said, people involved with clubs weren't happy. What was your response, Ross, to all of this? Did you somewhat feel maybe at 9 o'clock in the morning this is what was probably going to happen?
So when I woke up on Saturday morning, I really fancied Dungannon away, and then as the morning progressed and games started to drop, I started to think maybe it's just not wise to be making that sort of journey in the weather. So I then shifted, I'm just going to go to Dundalk because it's a whole lot closer to us. So that was my plan. But then the longer it goes on and you get that close to the kickoff and you think, oh, maybe I maybe could have went. But then for it to be postponed with people getting into the ground and members of Dungannon staff saying we're not sure if this is going on yet. That's the crazy part. And if the logic is we're trying to keep fans safe when they're traveling or whatever, the bulk of them had at least started their journey, so that's sort of a moot point.
In that occasion, it looked as though the referee called that game off. And then I can hear you screaming, Portadown fans. The final one of the lot was the game at 5 o'clock. The people thought, why wasn't this being called off? Or why weren't all games pushed to 5 o'clock if the weather was going to work? Very similar to the Dungannon-Linfield game. Called off with, 70 minutes to go before kickoff. A lot of fans from Mid-Ulster was already on their way out, or pretty much were at Coleraine ahead of the kickoff at that point. Gutted, wasted journey. Again, that was health and safety was the reason for that. And the main criticism that NIFL are getting is that why didn't they just take this out of referees' hands, out of clubs' hands, and say, we think because of the amber warning that all these games should have been called off. It's easy to say this should have happened in hindsight, but there's one thing that's probably not in doubt. This ended up not being a good look of a weekend for NIFL.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those things where it really just picked up a lot of heat to the point where, as you say, like, it's not necessarily something that's been done in the past. So, the heat that NIFL got and the backlash that they got, they might think it's slightly unfair. As Jared said, if they had called it all off the night before and then the next day everything's looking fine, they would have got backlash for that. He probably felt he was in a bit of a lose-lose situation. Could have even seen it that if those matches were called off, people on the day going, even if the weather still was the way it was, people going, oh, you could have played in this, could have travelled down without an issue. So unfortunately for NIFL, it probably was a lose-lose situation. They just made it a lot worse for themselves by with the decisions coming so late.
Yeah, they were damn if they didn't, damn if they didn't. But it was the fact they didn't make a single decision, as one decision. They tried to play it by ear for too long, and in the end, the Dundalk match, although it didn't finish for a different reason, the wind wasn't a factor. It was brisk, don't get me wrong, but you wouldn't look and think the wind is taking this game by the scruff. But I think if they made the decision early to call it, everybody might grumble a little bit the next day, but at least no one's in out of pocket because everybody stayed in on the Saturday, whereas supporters clubs are out hundreds, individual fans are out petrol money, ticket money if they got in. So it's tough look.
Highlighted the probably the claims of bias against this podcast of not focusing in on the games below the top flight. That was another part of this whole picture, is that we had a number of games in the championship which did go ahead. In fact, games that weren't too far away from the locations of where games were supposed to play in the top flight were able to get played. And that just added to the whole narrative of just mayhem, of what was going on. Why is it that Loughgall, a game couldn't be played there, but a couple of miles away at home park for Armagh could be played? We haven't got real clarity. Again, all these individual cases are based on health and safety officers per club. And it just shows how dedicated you are, Mr. Welsh, that you did go to a game. You were at that Dundalk game, which unfortunately came a cropper because of floodlights. Just added this very weird cherry on top of everything that weekend. Twitter was bizarre on Saturday.
Some people say dedicated, other people would tell me to get a life. But I need that fix. And two of the longest journeys are Ballymallard to anywhere and Institute to anywhere. So in terms of safety traveling, and those aren't main roads, those are strange ones to let proceed. And I was talking to a few Institute fans on the day, and they were saying the journey was a bit wild, but it was a whole lot calmer by kickoff. So it's tough, because how long do you give it before you start calling off games? Because they would have been traveling early. But any football at all, I'll be there.
And hearing from Stafford, the manager of Ballymallard, yes, I feel old now too, saying that he spoke of how he didn't particularly think that this game should have went ahead for his team against ours, going away to Clannyboy and Bangor. But they went up and they got a result. And he even talked about how there was players coming from other parts of the island up to Ballymar to then travel onwards. And there was this general feeling of mixed messages where if a lot of public transport's down because of safety and there's an amber warning to say don't be making unnecessary journeys if you possibly can, to then see games go ahead, it's the whole necessity thing versus what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And something I wanted to highlight was a statement posted online from our communities minister, Gordon Lyons. He said, football clubs, players and fans across Northern Ireland have been left in an appalling situation today. Posted this on Saturday. After they were forced to travel during an amber weather warning, only to have matches called off at the last minute. This is totally unacceptable, and the authorities must ensure that this doesn't happen again. Clarity could and should have been provided earlier in order to keep people safe and save time and money for everyone involved. So he's clearly making his thoughts clear. I'll get into what NIFL's statement to all this was in a second. He highlights here that there's more than just safety. There's money involved, and it looks as though NIFL are going to potentially try and find money to put forward to some of the supporters' buses and teams for the loss of cash there for putting on the buses. But it does put up that question. I think that will eventually narrow into, are we now in a situation where every single time we face an amber weather warning, are all the games going to be called off automatically or not? And is that even a good thing?
That's exactly what I thought myself, Peter. You could almost see now NIFL going a wee bit extreme with it, that matches that would have been played in the past, now they're just going to cancel all of them just to avoid facing this again. Again, they'll probably get backlash for that. As we said earlier, they are now in a lose-lose situation with this type of thing. But to the degree that it's blowing up, I couldn't blame them for making that stance from now on. I don't think Jared would want to be in that position again if people question him like this. So I think he'd much prefer to say, look, we've learned from the past, this is the decisions we're going to make, but it might not always be the best in the future.
He's highlighted in some interviews, Jared Lawler, that ultimately they are a members association, that he answers to the clubs, and he was talking to these clubs in the lead up to it. Actually, it's probably a good time to talk about his statement, which he published on Sunday. So this is Jared Lawler, CEO of the Northern Ireland Football League. On reflection, we made decisions over the past 48 hours with the best intentions. We considered a number of factors, listened to many differing opinions from our members' clubs, and we tried to manage it. And in hindsight, it backfired. At the end of the day, the buck stops with me. I take ownership. I apologise to anyone put out, and have corresponded with members today. We will put measures in place for the future to prevent a reoccurrence. This isn't a grandstand or to play to a gallery like some. I'll never hide, but as we say in Northern Ireland, we ... up and accept it. I think it's clear what he's alluding to there. He worked with people. It didn't really seem to get the right answer when you're trying to please so many different people. And in the end, he thinks it didn't work out. It's just about what he does. Because I haven't heard many people say, you know what, when there is an amber warning in the future, I do want all these games called off. I guess every amber warning you don't see trains and buses to Dublin called off. So that probably does seem a bit over the top. But when you do see other bodies take these steps, you can see that NIFL might need to be a bit more proactive than reactionary.
And that just is the tough one, because what sort of protocol can you put in place? Is it sort of like if the wind hits X mile an hour, we call it off? But who's going out and measuring that? It's such a hard thing to put down black and white for, where it does sort of have to be that case by case basis. And that's sort of how you do end up with situations like we had this weekend.
Health and safety is such a grey area as well, and it made it difficult for some clubs, because in another statement over the weekend, NIFL talked about the idea of competition integrity. And for some teams, playing this weekend wouldn't have been as beneficial, or some might suggest that it wouldn't have been as beneficial to play it now than maybe down the line. If maybe a team, and this is taken as a broad example, if there's a similar situation like this in the future, and the wind's howling and the weather's bad, it puts a club in a difficult situation where if, for example, their star player is injured or suspended, or they're a week away from a big transfer coming in, or whatever reason it might be, the people might say benefit, were there, they will struggle to make that decision, or in the public domain struggle to make a decision, because the public domain will go, this decision is in your hands, and of not playing this game will be beneficial to you, and therefore they make the wrong decision in going, to avoid this sort of criticism or suggestion, we're going to play this game, and then something really bad happens. And oftentimes it's up to the referee, who is independent. They can make the call. Teams might not like it, and we've seen numerous times where both teams disagree, and I think in some of these games both teams did disagree with the referee's decision to delay the game or suspend the game, postpone it, whatever. But when it's the referee's choice rather than a health and safety officer, for example, it takes that out, and an independent decision can be made rather than one where there can be other criticisms for.
With NIFL, do they just have to have a wee bit of a harder stance with this now, like other bodies do? So, like you're saying, for example, like transport being cancelled, those bodies seem very professional in how they've managed that and how they've dealt with it and how they have protocols in place for that. Now that we have experienced this, the NIFL have to be harder in the future, have something in place for this, and just completely remove that whole bias from it. It is just NIFL's decision every time whether or not the matches go ahead. The only other thing to consider is, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, thinking about other leagues, around the world, England, the Premier League, Scottish League. I can't think of when a weather warning like that has just cancelled the whole league. So again, maybe it does come back to, is it a bit harsh? Some of the criticism that NIFL's getting at the moment for not just taking that stance the night before.
If we return to discussion around sporting integrity, why aren't these games being played or have already been announced for Tuesday? Or why is there not being discussions that the fans could be across that this could happen? Was there a suggestion, as I've seen some people talk about online, on Monday evening this week? Could they have been played Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening? I appreciate that probably doesn't help Lauren, who need to be aware looking into what they're doing in Europe. But we rarely see these quick turnarounds. Is that something where, if we're talking about NIFL needing to step forward and take bold action, how much they can force clubs? Again, I'm not 100% sure, but is that something maybe fans would look into or would want NIFL to push? Or could it just be a bit rash and we'd be sitting here looking at games for the second time, and it looks like it's fine, but if they made that call on Saturday afternoon to play them on Monday or Sunday or Tuesday or something, could they have been blown away for the second time? And it's like, why did you do this so rashly?
Well, if the sporting integrity part is what they are most concerned with, that is the way to fix that. And that players will still be injured or players will still be suspended. And, you're sort of getting the same situation. I think the issue there is more expecting fans to sort of drop everything. It's on a Saturday, it's not crazy to have plans for a Tuesday already, be that work or social, so then you can't go. And I think you risk the wrath of fans there. But if sporting integrity is their issue, that would be the way to play it, because most teams are going to train on a Tuesday and Thursday night anyway, so there's your Tuesday free automatically.
It's something that we will likely come back to, the real winner being Storm Darragh. Well done, sir. You wrecked many a weekend. It definitely didn't wreck most people's weekends out. I'll tell you what, there may have been difficulties when it came to travel, but I still showed up for my little appointment to meet somebody in town on Saturday early evening, and it was pumping. So people were definitely out and about. Storm Darragh was a mere minor block in the road to getting the big Christmas jumper and sparkly dresses out. So Belfast was still pumping, and fair play to you, Ross. You got in. How long did you get into your game in East Belfast? Was it 70, 80 minutes? You even get that much before?
Oh no, it was 55. That's the second game involving Dundela I've seen this season. And the last one was abandoned early at Anna for fog as well. So I think I'm just gonna stay away.
You are 100% a Scot. So there you go. Anybody wondered why there's no games? There's that, but pretty much lasted the chat that you'd have for many of the big games. And let's go to one of the hallmarks of the kicking match schedule. It is the team of the season so far. I set these boys homework about 10 days, 2 weeks ago, to put together a side of players that they think have been the best individual players to make up the team of the Irish League season so far. All top flight. They'd be bold if you decided to go for something underneath the top flight, but this is what we're going. I give you freedom to go for formations, whatever way you want to play it. And we've got 3 separate teams. You don't know my team. You guys don't know each other's team. I don't know your team. I'm sure I'll get it posted online so you can ridicule us all, fans, on how we did. But this is an interesting experiment because it's one where you can get very stat-based and it can be used as a weapon for you or against you. And I guess if we're going to start with goalkeeper, which I'm forcing that we do as host, it's a very stats-driven.
Gully from the Glens.
Yep, same for me. McCarry was a close second for me, but Daniel came through at the end.
I disagree. I think there's a real gulf between him and the next best keeper, who I wouldn't say is McCarry, but whoever it is, I think he's well out in front and first.
And the reason why he is the best keeper, and I agree, I do think he is the clear best keeper, it's on how many big time saves he has made. Is he totally impeccable? No. But he came into this league with a lot to prove. He had the stature. He passed the eye test for a goalkeeper. And after a big injury, he was coming in to try and prove his worth. And the Glens have really latched on to something. He uses his big wingspan and body to its absolute max potential. His performances are so steady. It's helped that backline at Glentoran hugely. And I wouldn't be surprised if these performances alone would get other teams interested. If he is at Glentoran next year, I think none of us would be surprised if he wasn't. But of what's been a topsy-turvy season in East Belfast, Yolai's been a shining star.
Without a doubt. I mean, even the cup game against Linfield recently, neither team was good in that, but he was the standout that kept the Glens in it. That just let them get that winner right at the end. But without him that day, Linfield definitely would have been going through.
Yeah, my team is a lot of vibes and feelings and eye test. And I assumed he had conceded a lot more than he had, but he was going in anyway. But that's a pretty shored up defense the Glens have, just looking at their goals conceded. You obviously get the game where they're going to ship a couple of goals, 2-2 against Loughgall the other week. But it goes back to those big saves, and we haven't had a sniff against them in any of the games, really. He's imperious back there.
Yeah, big match player as well. I'm thinking of some of those games against Larne where there was big saves that kept the Glens in the games at Inver Park. And it's always just how outstretchy is, how last ditch they can be. It's not just kind of a acrobatic save. It's a big chance in a big moment. And it's often one-on-one where he shined. They've played 19 games, conceded 18. I was at that Lockall game, and to think that they could have played 19 games and only be on 16 goals conceded would be huge. Like, you look at Linfield, they've conceded the least, but obviously their carousel in nets isn't going to put anybody up there. Let's give a bit of shine to Aaron Carey. I think he's only conceded one more all season than GLI and has been a real transformative player at the back line. Now, Curry will tell you that he's the best player. I think the difference between him and Yolai is that Yolai has just had these big moments. Clearly, McCarry's had big saves. I just think it's the highlight reel plays and the dominance of his box is what's got him over the line.
I believe you can get him on a pre-contract as well at the minute. I'd bite your hand off for him.
Would that interest you, Blues fan, Ross?
Slightly. Right, slightly.
Yeah, that's the game you play, I guess, when you sign all these players to one-year deals. You don't want to have the anchor around your neck of a multi-season deal for a player that ain't for you. But it's not been a particularly perfect set of transfers the Glens have had this season, but he has been a winner, and I think has been in this team, penciled into this team for maybe a month. Like, it was going to take a lot for me not to have him in this team, maybe late October onwards.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I've been saying for quite a bit of the season that he's been a real standout, and just a good bit ahead of anyone else there.
Fellas, let's talk about formations beyond here. How many defenders do you have in your teams?
Got 4.
I've also got 4.
I've got 4 too. We're all quite traditional. That's interesting because there's some positions in this team that I felt were pretty nailed on. There's a winger in here that's nailed on for me. I think up front might not be as fluid as people might think. And there was definitely a centre-back that I was nailed on for. I didn't realise how many players I liked play left-back. Because I'm going to try and not do this, but I would say there's maybe 2 or 3 players, no, let's say around 2, that I might have stuck in the right-back position if it wasn't for the fact that I feel as though it would have been unfair. The integrity of the right-back game would have been unfair. Was left back as difficult / easy for you to slot in as I'm saying it was for me?
Well, I'm looking at a bit of paper here, and I still have 2 names down at the left back position. So yes, it's just as difficult, and I'm still not sure, even talking now, which one I'm going to go with.
Ross, easy, hard for you?
A hemmed and hammed, but I'm happy enough with my choice.
I'm going to start and say that I've rated this player for a while. I think he's young, he's exciting, he's attacking, which sometimes can be that sparkle that maybe overshines what really is the key part of the job, and that's being a defender. He is destined for bigger and better things. Sorry, Dungannon fans, but I mean, he has just got the skills. He's just in that age range. He's added goals, he's added assists. It's Adam Glennie from Dungannon.
He is not my left back, but he is shoehorned in elsewhere.
Haven't seen Ross's team, but potentially in the same position I have him in as well. He is in my team, but not left back.
See, I feel very strong that he is left, and I know all of these players can play both sides, but that's how I feel for me. I mean, just he passes the eye test, which is something we'll discuss a lot, but he goes up and down that wing, so much great passing. Tell me who your guys are, and then I can talk about the players who didn't just jump in ahead of Glennie.
I went for Danny Amos.
I have also went for him. McCulloch was the other one that I was flirting with. I think he's been a great signing for the Ports, but I just think that Amos is getting in front of him.
And I understand you're probably going to shoo away the suggestion because you see this player week in and week out. My collection of left backs, Danny Amos, I think maybe yes, I agree, has added a lot of quality to that Glentoran team. He's made that left back position his own. I feel as though McCulloch was higher than him. I think McCulloch's been a massive improvement to that Port side. He's kind of the heartbeat to it, driving from deep. he gets stuck in defensively. He has that stature as well. He's contributed assists every once in a while when he's been asked to move up and down that pitch. He's kind of everything along that left-hand side. But I almost sneaked in Micheál Glynn. I think he's doing a lot for Cliftonville. I know wingbacks are a key component of the Cliftonville style, but I think he, after a couple of games to find himself in the team, he is a constant threat, big body defender, a bit like McCallion, and he fits into that team very, very nicely.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And you're right, it did take a couple of games, but now that he's in that team, the way he drives forward and also drives into the midfield and creates that space out on the left wing is excellent. He was down at one point, but shied away from it, trying not to be biased. I'll come to that in the rest of my team at some point, but no, he has been excellent. He's been a great signing.
So if that's our left back, let's jump over to right back. Who have you guys got?
I've got Kirk Miller.
Yeah, I agree with Ross.
I've
Bold.
got him in. No, honestly, I've got him in.
Because of just, like, you feel as though he's adding width from deep. I mean, sorry, Ross, I've got to go straight to you. Right back, is that fair?
I changed mine as we spoke there, so I now have Glennie at right back.
So, Glennie at right back and Amos at left back.
Yep,
I'm going to do a bit of a spoiler here. There's 0 Larne players in my team.
likewise.
Same here.
Haven't played a huge amount of games. The ones that they've played have not been impressive. And on top of that, has anybody been able to establish themselves in the side? I appreciate they've been decent enough at the back, stats-wise, but you just haven't had a consistent rotation or consistent basis of a side. You're like, they beat out someone who's played excellently for 18, 19 games. So, this is the incumbent of Tomas Cosgrove, as always, best right back in the league. Linfield's been rotational, which is why I wouldn't really say Miller's that, but hey, look, I get it sometimes when there's 3 at the back. Okay. Glens have changed up recently. You're looking at maybe McGinty on that, or Scott on the right hand side for Dungannon as one of the players who've done well. Look, I'll tell you, I was going to sneak in here Scott from Ballymena, but similarly in the Miller thing, which is why I'm questioning you, Joe, I think he probably plays too much high up the pitch to realistically be a wing back. Long story short, it's Shea Kearney. All right, still dynamic, still potent enough. Might not be a star of the league in his own right, and I think McCulloch, Amos, and definitely Glenn, I think have had better seasons on him. But I'm going to say as a classic right back, I think he's the best one going at the minute. Very talented, very skillful player. Maybe not highlight reel worthy. So far.
It was McCulloch that I've just wielded my axe on. So I've moved Glennie from centre back to right back, and I've brought in a centre half in lieu of McCulloch. So I think he's unlucky to miss out. But yeah, Shea Kearney, cracking little player, and you'd be shocked if he doesn't get a move over the water in the next season or so. Yeah.
When he's cooking, isn't always, can kind of be off the boil you every once in a while. There's an embarrassment of riches for Cliftonville when everybody's fit. But when he is going through the gears, he's very, very impressive. I'm sure you would agree, Joe.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Did take him a wee bit of time to get going this season, but now that he's fully going, he's absolutely brilliant. To defend my Miller pick, the more I'm looking at my team, a 3-5-2 might have actually been better than a 4-4-2, because I'm looking at the left wing as well, and I'm thinking, because you need to ask me about my managerial style. It's very attacking. They're all getting bored.
Well, let's slip into the centre of defence. There was one player that was nailed on for me, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to many others, and it's Lewis McKinnon. I usually hate this as a term, a Rolls Royce of a player, but he essentially is that. Whatever it is, 21, 22, big bodied, takes care of everything in the air. He's not a lanky player. He's quite broad. Plays it out nicely from the back. I mean, I never thought he stood out massively for Carrick, but he's got the red shirt of Portadown, needs to be a key cog in this side, and I think him and his relationship with Altentop have been vital. It's probably the most important part of this Portadown team and their ability to be in the top six currently. If Portadown they're re-signing a lot of players that they signed to a 1 year deal. I think we've seen Ubacan, Ukek, McCarry recently. The one I know Portadown fans are clamouring for is McKinnon, and he has it all, even at the age that he's at.
Yeah, he's in my team as well, and he was, as you say, he's one of the first names that went down. There's probably about 3 or 4 players in this team that I knew were definitely going straight in, and he was absolutely one of them. He's been absolutely incredible, as you say, both on the ball and the way he deals with things in the air, and just the organization of that back line. I imagine a lot of it comes from him.
Great player, not in my team.
I'll ask you this then, Joe. Why him and not Alton Top? Because Alton Top's a bit more nimble. He plays these nice Hollywood balls from deep. Don't always come off, but when they do, Portadown look like a completely different side. I think the answer is that McKinnon one-on-one on the ball is just that more superior player. I think he's more of a big time, big dog in the trenches type player. And I think Alton Top has elements of that. And I honestly was considering a double up here for both of them. In that Portadown back line, what makes McKinnon above Alton Top for you?
Yeah, it was close enough. Similar, both of them were down on my team sheet at one point. I think it is just that confidence on the ball, as you say, the strength as well. The way he can just drive out, be calm, find the pass, and straight back into shape again is just what sort of set him slightly apart from Alton Top. Not that he can't do it, but there's just something a bit more about him. Maybe it's just an eye test as opposed to there might not be necessarily any stats or anything to back it up, but he's really stood out to me this season every time I've seen him.
Ross, who's your duo then?
So I'll preface this that there's obviously going to be Linfield bias, but it has been an enjoyable season. So I'm just going for players that bring me joy within the bland greyness. So I've got Ewan East in there, even though he hasn't really been a centre back this year. He's been more fullback. And I've got Frankie Vid.
So, fellas, players playing positions, right? And
I was laughed at for Miller. I can't believe this.
right, Joe, give us your back line. Have you decided if it's a 3 or a 2 yet?
Do you know what? I will. I'll change it. So I'm gonna move Amos back in the being a centre half in there.
Miller as right wing back, and who's your left wing back?
Glennie.
Glennie. There you go. The Glennie love in. And your duo then, Ross, is East and
Frankie Vid.
Frankie Vid. Frankie Vid has started off very, very well this season. Age is another thing that makes him shine. The Glentoran backline, particularly at home, was a strong point where they weren't being massively rocked or looked as though they were at 6s and 7s. It wasn't a player that I went for. I think there's some fan bases that are screaming at their podcast player of who they think should be in here. For a second, I was thinking that maybe Dahi McCallion from Ballymena was going to be my player. A team who usually keeps it tight, went on this excellent run, made a nice little duo with Kim Nelson. I think as much as Kim Nelson is able to clean up a lot, Dahi McCallion, I watched a couple of highlights. What he's able to do is take players one-on-one, oftentimes can make that great tackle. I watched back the highlights between Ballymena and Portadown because I know Portadown had a lot of chances in that game. They lost 3-0, but there was some times where McCallion was just getting that leg stretch out and stopping it being what could have been a certain goal. But I just didn't fancy him. Then brings up the golden boy of Mournview Park, Barney McCune, who I agree, he is someone that's brought something to this Glenavon back line that they haven't had. A bit of youthful exuberance, that dogged terrier style, defending. He's got the odd goal from a header. Doesn't make it in. I just think, and I appreciate he's man who's got 2 red cards as the end of the season. I think overall game, it's Johnny Addis. His ability on the ball is second to none. It's something that he doesn't get enough credit for. He is the pivot for this team that just spreads the ball out and he's pretty nifty when it's up in the air. He'll take it down up in the air. He can score a few goals as well, and I think he's been that calm, assured presence in that back line. So I have Addis partnering McKinnon in my duo.
Everybody loves him. He's absolutely incredible and such a well-rounded player. Like there was a tackle he made against Larne the other day, and it was just how he got there. The slide tackle almost from behind in the box did not give away a penalty. I know he did end up getting the red card in that game, a second yellow, but that tackle alone, I just thought that is unbelievable that is at this level.
He's a big boy defender, and he looks every part of being a top tier player in this league. Do you have any sympathy, particularly for Barney McCallion not getting any love from any of us?
He's a good player, but they've shipped 28 goals and their second bottom is my issue. That's why I couldn't squeeze him in alongside my Linfield bias, obviously.
So, looking at this midfield collection, what's the number of players that you have in midfield each? I have the boring 4.
Yeah, I have a 4.
I guess in this new formation I've got 3.
3, including the wingbacks?
No, so
5-3-2.
5.
Cool.
5 including the wingbacks.
Cool. So you've got 3 in midfield, wingbacks. Excellent. Should we all just name Joel Cooper now?
Yep.
He's in mine.
Yep. I mean,
You see enough.
Star Boy this season, not particularly old, not particularly young, and he is Linfield. He's a Superman this season. Scores goals, dominates the game, sets up goals, everything. Numbers say he's one of the best players in the league. Eye test says he's one of the best players in the league. He fits into every single team in this division. Who wouldn't want him? Up there, if we're talking about team of the decade, is he maybe the first one you put on your team sheet over the past 10 years? He is excellence at this level, and he's showing it this year.
Yeah, this year he just is the whole infield game plan at times. Just get the ball out to Cooper and see what happens. And a lot of the time it's been very good performances from him. The only times he has been poor, it's come out that he's had knocks or he's been ill. For me, hands down, the best player in the league.
The smashing bit of Linfield spin, that isn't it? Anytime he has a bad game, he's got a knock or he's ill.
Well,
Um,
I think I've seen him have the off games. He's one of the players who I have rarely seen teams effectively manage out of the game. It's usually him. There's common 2 players on him. There's definitely one that's sticking with him the whole time. And even when they know he's going to do the things that he does, still does them.
Like he can get the ball right out on the touchline and have 3 around him, and you still just think there's a chance something can happen here. He's one of the real flair players. That's just it just does bring joy to watch him. And as you say, when he is double man marked out of games, you see that Linfields suffer. And I think the Glens have done that quite well. I feel like I'm doing nothing but praise the Glens so far on this podcast. I'm sure I'll cut that out at some point, but
That's because you probably see them at their best 3 times this season so far. I have Joel Cooper on the left. I don't know how. Sticking to my left must be left and right must be right. On the other side is Reece Campbell. I didn't know how this move to Coleraine was going to work out, but it's working. He is scoring goals. He's providing assists. He's adding a little bit of spark. He's everything you want in a winger. He's tricky. He's got a great weapon of a shot on him. He can cross. He can dribble. You would love him to take that next step and totally take over games in the way that Joel Cooper can do. The ball can maybe escape him the odd time. The delivery isn't nailed on 99 out of 100 times, but he had so much flair and dynamism and drive to get into the box and onto the ball that despite Coleraine not having a great season at all when it comes to the table, and clearly their bright sparks being all forward driven, I know there's other star players when it comes to Coleraine. I think Reece Campbell is that perfect mix this season of eye test, stats, and just adding exactly what Coleraine needed, that extra true wide player. They had a big hole in this team after McKendry left, and they've filled it very, very well with him.
Yeah, you'd say that's the one big signing Coleraine have got right since the went full time. He's been a real game changer, and as you say, I actually forgot McKendry had left. That's how seamless the transition has been. And the goals they're scoring, you think if Coleraine can sort of figure it out a wee bit more at the back, they'll be right up there, challenging for certainly Europe anyway.
It sounds as though neither of you guys have picked him up. He has scored 6 goals this year and provided a number of assists. Why hasn't he fit into your teams?
Because Kirk Miller's better.
I guess that gives it away that I don't have Kirk Miller in my team, as I've put Reece Campbell on the right hand side. That then suggests Blue Boy Homeboy Ross is went for Kirk.
Are we not just naming the Linfield team? Is that not what we're doing tonight? Yes, Cooper and Miller on the wings. If you've watched Linfield, it'll be Cooper and Miller on the same wing a lot of the time. But if I was managing the team, they'd be on separate wings.
Well, for me, Cooper and Miller are on the same wing with Miller at right wing back. So maybe I'm just David Healy sitting here picking this team. Yeah, mine's obviously slightly different now with 3 midfielders. Cooper playing off the right hand side. I think my midfielder in the middle could potentially be a bit controversial in terms of I could be wrong there, but it is my bias coming in. I've gone for Ronan Dock in the middle of the midfield.
Definitely one of those players that does not get enough shine, and it takes a wonder assist. I'm thinking, was he the one that played in that ball to over to Donnelly? That first game of the season against Portadown where it got pinged in. That was just so lush where it eventually came to Curran at the other side. He's a maestro on the ball, beautiful passer. It's an area, let's be fair, I think we'll all talk about this. Centre midfield, this is probably where we're going to have our biggest divergence. I mean, I found it difficult just because I was torn between one player and the other. It's probably my most eye test driven area of the team, and I think I've made a big controversial move, which I will explain. So to finish off your midfield, Joe, you have Cooper, you have Doherty, and who's the third one if I haven't missed them out?
Biggie Romana.
Like this a lot. Didn't go for it, but I think we're probably cutting hairs on who we picked for. Yeah. Ross, who's your duo?
So for one spot, I was between Biggie and Leo Alves. So I was go Leo Alves to be a bit different. And then Kyle McCallion is my other.
Okay, let's get into the Dungannon decision, because I do have a Dungannon midfielder in my team, and it wasn't to be different. It's Alves. He has been this little player. He sneaked into the league last term, and it took a while for people to take notice. But this season, I maybe it's just my own ignorance, I just see him shine more and more. His ability on the ball to shift and move and to create these triangles. The Dungannon midfield is an area which is the heart of its side. It's the heart of every side, but it's the keystone of it all. You've got Dylan, you've got Biggie, and then you have Alves. I just think Alves has that little extra bit of pace, that rapidness, that unpredictability that I just really, really like. Bigger man has got the goals. I do appreciate that, and is more battling and has a lot of the progressive moves that Alves has. I just think Alves can slip into wide areas and draw players away. And his presence buzzing around the box has been an underrated quality, which is why he makes it into my team. Why did you fall on the Bigorama side of this discussion, Joe?
I think, as you say, it was pretty tight. Like, I don't think there'd be too many people listening going, "Why would you go for him and not him?" As if like, my God, why have you made that decision? I think it probably was the goals, maybe just slightly swayed me. It's also the presence that Biggie has as well is just absolutely incredible when he's on the pitch. The way he finds the space sometimes is just amazing. But it was a pretty tight decision.
It then falls to me to officially confirm that Ben Kennedy isn't in any of our teams. I talked about Yolai being in my team from late October. If I was talking to mid-September Peter Cinnamon, and he'd be like, what happened to Ben Kennedy that he did not feature in this team? He was the Irish League for a couple of weeks, driving his team to the top of the division. He scored goals. He helped his team to win so many games. Why isn't it any of our sides?
Because when's the last time you heard of him? I feel like he's on a bit of a stretch where he hasn't been up to much. That sort of coincides with Ballomina's slump, which maybe is indicative of why he should be in the team, that he clearly is so crucial for them. But 10 goals, five of them are penalties. That didn't put him in my team alone.
Yeah, penalties kind of adds to the was it all? He scored goals from open play before plenty of times, but the stats were significantly padded by penalties and set piece goals, either free kicks or coming in from corners.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, I think at one point during the season he was absolutely nailed on. Maybe it is a wee bit of just recency bias that he's out of it again. He might feel it's a bit unfair. Everyone goes through a poor run of form, but no, strangely I didn't even consider him when it came to making this. He came into my head and he was almost straight back out again.
I've went for his teammate Josh Carson. I think he has been such an important cog in the side. He got a lot of attention early on in the season for reasons he probably wouldn't have liked for that big tackle against Linfield. But as Ballymena had their big run, he was one of the players that looked to have the maturity which Ballymena lacked last season. A force in midfield where he could provide assists. He could also do the dirty work at the back. He is true box to box when he's in full flow. And you talk about eye test. I just think he looks like the grown up in the center of the park for Ballymena. Really calm, really assured. Got that physical presence as well, and might not have the same kind of goal stats as other players like his fellow Ben Kennedy does, but he is the reason why Ballymena worked at the time that they do. And if he's getting the game by the scruff of the neck, that's when Ballymena are cooking. Let's talk about Cal McCallion here. He's the final player midfield that we need to talk about. Last year's Ulster Player of the not Ulster Player of the Year, but NIFL Irish League Player of the Year. Of course, it should have been Levi Eyes, but we'll get over it eventually. What is it about Mr. McCallion that you've seen week in, week out that think that he is better than anybody else in his position, Mr. Welsh?
The one word for Kyle McLean is metronomic. He gets Linfield going. We've missed him this last load of games, and sure we've been winning, but it's been faltering performances. And he's a great player. I'm not saying this to put him down, but he's a player you notice more when he's not there. And we can only hope that his knee injury isn't as long term as it could be, because you just desperately miss him in that midfield.
Another player that perhaps people might say we're missing, Ryan Mays was such an important part of the Portadown side that went up the table, always seems to be getting in and around important attacking areas. He just hasn't started enough games for me. It's just, if he was sitting there with 18 starts and maybe 2 more goals and all the rest, he probably would be in with a shout, but I think that's what maybe hurt his chances in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree. I briefly spoke with Jack on this about the team, and he was very much for Mace being in the team, but of course he has a wee bit of a Portadown bias. I don't know if he's just as influential as those other players that we have named. Now, don't get me wrong, he certainly is, but with a few less starts and maybe the team that he's in, I favoured the others more.
So I have two attackers. We all have two attackers, do we?
Yep.
Yep.
I guess I'll start off with you, Ross. It's what Fitzpatrick and who else?
It's definitely not Fitzpatrick. It's definitely not Fitzpatrick. It is
Okay,
not
before you
McCallion.
say anything, I think a lot of people will think this is 3-2 at this position. That's how I'm feeling, and I'm not locked in just yet. So you can maybe help make my mind up here, for good or for bad, for good or for worse. Did you feel similarly that this is 3-2 this season?
For me, there was a very obvious one, and then a supplemental second. So my very obvious one is the timeless St. Joseph of Ardoyne, and then I've got Matthew Shevlin in there with him.
Ross, was it 3-2 for you?
Yeah, I've got the exact same front two up there.
I have Joe Gormley simply because of the goals, the influence, the ability to win games on his own. I say that you can't just name a player on stats, or this would be a team that would just be on paper. But he has everything this year, and yeah, the age thing will always be talked about between now and the end of his career. But he has been majestic in all senses, and we forever can't get through a podcast without talking about the attacking missing three from Cliftonville that we will eventually stop talking about. But he has filled that role aptly, and it would be hard to deny him a space in this team. The other striker was down between Shevlin and Offord. Shevlin didn't kick off this season particularly well. He didn't get, after maybe 5-6 games, if memory serves me well, he wasn't sitting there massively high up the charts. Offord started off a lot better, but then he waned in the middle and has risen up to the top. Two different players, and the stats would argue that it should be Shevlin in this position because he scored 13 goals, Offord only with the 8. And despite the fact that I think Offord has scored more influential goals, more impressive goals, and has probably been a bigger part of the overall side of Crusaders, it is hard to deny that Shevlin should be the other striker. 13 goals, all types, poacher, maybe doesn't impact the game outside of the box that some would like, but it's hard to deny a pure goal scorer like that at this level.
Without a doubt. Offord did come into my head at the start. I think it maybe was his goal tally that put me off, which I know you said at the start of this about stats and stuff. That maybe did. It's maybe a bit harsh for him because he has been very good. He's really impressed me. He really impressed me against us at Seaview. He was brilliant that day. So you've got me thinking now, but I am going to stick with Shevlin, I think.
I was almost going to say these are all league goals, by the way, which I think kind of should, well, it should only be the factor here. I dislike when small regional cups, when Team X is able to bully a small side and get a hat trick that then is added on to totals. But I was going to say, well, if you offered 5 more goals and put on 13 goals and you had to just do pure eye test, but that would be a nonsense because 5 goals is so significant, and that probably shows you why Shevlin deserves to be there. Team had fairly similar seasons from a team point of view, and I think Shevlin is featured in a team of this part of the season so far ranking previously. But he gets it again on top form recently, and it makes it easy when you're naming the top 2 goal scorers in the league as the 2 strikers. Is there any other names that could have even be honourable mention outside of Offord? Like if you're looking at the goal scoring charts, Ben Kennedy is the highest player, and then Offord, Ben Kennedy on 11 goals, and then Offord on 8 are the 2 highest players that on the goal scoring charts that aren't mentioned. You have Rambays on 7 goals, Reece Campbell on 6, McCallion on 5, Nathaniel Ferris and McDade both on 5. I don't think you include any of them. If you look down the side, there hasn't been really a a Cliftonville player for Portadown. Ahu Ubacan has been it, but he hasn't dominated any game that I've seen him in. The Glen striking woes are well documented, and it seems to be everybody gets to have a go to be top marksman of the week, and then they fade away. So it hasn't been a dynamite year for attacking players, but we've seen a decent amount of goals.
Yeah, you can see from the list that goals are coming from elsewhere. Linfield top of the league without a standout front man at the minute because the goals are coming from midfield and from Cooper. The Ports are spreading their goals around. I like Obakan, but I don't think he does enough to get into my team. What you're saying about Offord's 5 goals behind, I think if they are even, Offord goes in based on the linchpin of that team. So, if the Crews are to pick up their season, I think you'll end up seeing Offord in a lot of teams of the actual season.
Yeah, I think a long way to go for him. So there's your side. Just to remind everybody, I'll start with my own. I had Glentoran's Yola in goals. I had Shea Kearney of Cliftonville at right back. Adam Glennie of Dungannon at left back. I have Johnny Addis from Cliftonville. Partnering Lewis McKinnon from Portadown in defence. A midfield of Joe Cooper from Linfield, Leo Alves from Dungannon Swifts, Josh Carson from Ballymena, and Reese Campbell on the right hand side from Coleraine. And then up top, it's Colerane's Matthew Shevlin and Cliftonville's Joe Gormley.
For myself, I've got Giola and Nets, 3 at the back of Amos, Addis, and McKinnon. Miller at right wing back and Glennie at left wing back. And then 3 in the midfield of Biggie, Doc in the middle, and then Cooper. And then 2 up top with Shevlin and Gormley.
And then I've also got Gilly, left back Amos, right back Glennie, Vid and East, centre backs, McCallion and Alves in the middle, Cooper and Miller, top of the league Linfield wingers on each side, and then Gormley and Shevlin up top.
We aren't the only people that think doing this is a good idea, and I've been doing this for a couple of years anyway, but the newsletter have also put together their team of the season based on SofaScore data. So a stats team of the season looks like 3-5-2. We have McCary in nets with a back line of Danny Amos, Patrick McLean, and Barney McCune, all with match ratings over 7.19 is the lowest average rating between those sides. Surprising. I guess that helps your argument to stick Danny Amos as a part of a 3, Joe.
Exactly, yep.
So automatically Glenelg fans think stats are the way to go. Midfield, unsurprisingly, Joe Cooper. You also have Cal McLean, another bonus for you. Ross, you have Jimmy Glacken from Coleraine, Josh Carson, pat myself in the back there. Also in midfield, you add in Kirk Miller, who was a favourite of both you guys, and then Joe Gormley and Matthew Shevlin up top. So I mean, the numbers and the eye tests all combine. I did ask people online to say, what do you think is your what player should feature, what team do you have? I've got shout outs for Barney McCune from Unofficial Glenavon. Mobo Drums says Kirk Miller, so he's backing you guys. Obviously Glenavon fan, the Glens Voice says Yoli, Frankie Vid, Amos and Sule. Marcus is saying, actually he's giving me a full team: McCary, McGee, McKinnon, Glennie, Amos, Bigorama, Thompson, Cooper, Offord, Gormley, Shevlin. That was something I was considering, is going for Offord, Gormley and Shevlin. You almost lose Cooper there, because I don't think you could play Cooper in a midfield 3.
Agree, unless he's got the free rule. I personally like the fellow who just named the Dungannon team.
Yeah, Johnny Smith. I think that's fair. I think that's very on brand for Johnny Smith, and I that's not a slight, and I appreciate that. And look, we went for Glennie and Alves and Bigorama. John McGovern, he suggests here, I think Cal McGinty hasn't reached like a consensus yet within the league. If I had a little Adam Toe moment that I think's maybe filtered away because he hasn't started every week for Lockall, but I will find that next gem. Cal McGinty, he's probably a player that might be up next. Why didn't John McGovern get enough love? He's probably also suffered from bright part early on in the season. Big goal, I think, against Lauren will be his peak, and then just hasn't kept up such top end goal scoring streak.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. You come back to the likes of Ben Kennedy. Like, if you're doing this even just 3 weeks ago, this team is probably completely different. It's one of those ever changing things, and I wouldn't rule out someone like McKendry making it into, if you were to do this in another 3 weeks. Seeing him against Cliftonville the other day is another player just to keep an eye on in terms of really settling in to the team, to the Lauren team. So I think it's one of those things. Depends on when you do it. It's going to change so much.
And I think if I can make a prediction, I would be surprised if we don't see at least two Lawn players be in the end of season team.
Yeah, I mean,
And if there's not, oh dear.
yeah, everybody's just waiting for Lauren to come through at some point. And, if like Andy Ryan or if Leroy Miller comes back and plays the way we know he can play, they're shoe-ins any year for your team of the season.
We'll be able to answer this question in a couple of months because we're at the 19 broadly game point. Could a player like Leroy Miller come in and get into the team of the season after not playing half a year? Or like broadly, how much of this team do you think should be sitting here come the end of the season in your team? I guess law of averages said at least 5 or 6 should still be there.
Yeah, I'm looking at a good whack of them. If Linfield win the league, a lot of my team stays the same. If the two strikers keep playing the same way, that stays the same. But the big unknown is Lauren are just so in the doldrums now. If the likes of a Miller comes in and just brings them on a charge, you're sort of half looking at him saying he was the difference, the jump start that got them going.
No, I'm definitely catching you on the hoof here, fellas, but I'm going to do it anyway. If we're going to complete this football award season of the half season so far, who is, based on 19 or so games each per team, who's the player of the year, the young player of the year, and the manager of the year? Is it Cooper player of the year based on all of our hype? Does that make that easy?
If it was given out today, yes, Cooper, but I think it will turn into Miller, Kirk Miller.
That'll kind of be a real crowning of his career. To get that, it's a strange award. If Cooper's that, is there a clear young player of the year this season? I know it's kind of a weird thing of where does it start, 2023. Like, I don't think it's McKinnon, even though he probably fits there age wise and all the rest. It's maybe Glennie, albeit he could be out now for a significant amount of time based on what happened against Crusaders. But he's probably my young player of the year.
Well, yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. McKinnon was a thought, but I think Glennie would maybe just pip him to it. Yeah, that's how I would say it at the moment.
I don't think you can give it to McKinnon because I don't think it should be a centre back. I don't think that's what the award should be.
It's not a young player of the year position, is it?
No, no, you don't want a young centre back winning the whole thing. I'll completely contradict myself and say Matthew
Kirk Miller.
Matthew Orr for Linfield, shock, has been brilliant. I don't think he's player of the year worthy, but I just think he deserves a wee shout out off of me.
So top of the league, couple of points. Why isn't David Healy manager of the season so far?
Have you watched much Linfield this year? I think we're winning in spite of David Healy being the manager, and we're winning because Joel Cooper and Kirk Miller are doing Joel Cooper and Kirk Miller things.
Does that then make this award between the three of us hone in between Nal Curry and Rodney McAree?
I think so. Echo Ross's point. It's definitely not David at the top of the league, but like for a long time, I thought Ross was exaggerating just how poor Linfield are. But having watched them recently, it's incredible that they are top of the league. They are not playing good football at all. I think for me, it would probably be Rodney. I think he's probably just going to pip Niall to that.
I still don't think we'll win the league. Just to add on to that, I think the underlying everything, I just don't think we'll win the league. But I don't know who wins it really, to be honest. For me, it is between Rodney and Niall at the minute. If Cliftonville can put on any sort of charge, then you sort of have to throw Jim Magilton in that frame.
I'm gonna give it to Curry. I think they've been the fun, the surprise package. That they've had the biggest turnaround he seems to have inspired that on, as much as they aren't as pretty on the eye to watch. My goodness, if they had gumption, lay it on in games, and they are the team that's had the biggest turnaround. Most shocking, I know no one predicted Dungannon to do well this season, except me, but Portadown definitely is the surprise. We go to this weekend, and unless some sort of, I don't know, torrential storm Miller comes and takes over the league, or maybe it will at Windsor Park on Saturday, we will have only 5 games this weekend. Sad. Lauren and Glenavon is postponed because they, again, couldn't be agreed to be played on the Sunday, unfortunately. So 5 games. Crusaders against Glentoran, Seaview, televised or at least streamed. It's so hard to tell coming off the back of this week's break how all these teams are going to be set up. I think a lot of teams will be caught cold, and we could see far more surprises than we usually would. If there was to be a surprise for me between these two sides, is that it's an entertaining game.
Disagree. This is possibly my favorite fixture in the whole calendar. Cruise End to Seaview.
Well, we all remember the opening day of the season, dynamic passing, defense splitting balls. It was a joy to behold. Total football.
I was still living my Wales adventure at that point, so that is not in my memory bank. I was spared that one, but this is going to be a humdinger. You heard it here first.
So who wins out 4-3 here then, Ross?
Glens win 3-1.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
They turn up for the big games. They've won the league 3 times already in their big games. 3-1 Glens.
This is to me, Joe, a bit like when someone has well, it's exactly like that. They've seen a team beat their own team and then massively overrate their ability because they're able to do it. To me, you know,
It seems exactly like that, doesn't it? I am nowhere near as hopeful. I'm more on your side of the fence with this one, Peter. Neither team overly excite me whatsoever. I could be a real. I tell you what, I don't think I've predicted a 0-0 all season. It could be a real boring 0-0.
you'll actually be surprised by how few times 0-0s actually happen. Which is why I try to never predict it. The prediction league, I think I'll make this my prediction league game this week though. I am going to say 1-1. I'm going to say Marcus Keane scores from a header, and then Offord scores from a penalty. And everybody leaves slightly perturbed. 1-1 is how it ends in North Belfast. Saturday, we've got 4 games. Ballymena against the Swifts. I think this could be an odd, tricky 2-2. You know, I've openly admitted that I think Ballymena are going to struggle to score goals until they sort out a few more additions up top, or just try and change the shape of their team. Dungannon are always worth 2 goals, so I'm going to go 2-2 in this occasion. Maybe Ballymena pulled it back late. Ben Kennedy running the whole pitch to laugh in our faces.
I'm going to say Dungannon are going to come away victorious in this one, so I'm going to say 2-1.
I've got 0-2 for the Swifts.
I think at the start of the season, if you talked about this game, you would say that's quite significant for both these teams. It has been an important fixture for these sides in recent times, but it's usually at the bottom of the league. This is important for Swifts to keep up their momentum towards the top of the table and to continue to solidify their top 6 credentials. I mean, but for Ballymena, if they lose this game, they're out of it at 7th, and they don't want to be sitting out for too much, despite their big run and getting all the points. This is not exactly a 6-pointer, but it can put daylight between them, good and for bad, and that's why maybe I'm gonna say it might be more nervy than we expect.
Yeah, I could see that being the case, but I just think the rotten run Ballymena are on, you just back Dungannon to have the class to sort of pull it through, and I think it'd be handy enough. Strangely, I've nothing to back this up, but I feel like Ballymena don't like playing at home. That could be totally wrong, but I feel like that is a thing.
Your selection of Crusaders Glentoran being the thriller of the week was short-sighted. It's gotta be Carricklockall, surely.
No, I'm going the other way. This is real nervy and cagey stuff. This is basement battle. Nobody wants to lose.
Not when Paul Lately scored 2 goals in the first 12 minutes.
Both disallowed for offside. 0-0.
That's that's fair. That's fair. I think this could maybe ignite something in Loughgall. Getting those 2 goals. I think they would love to have played Lauren on Saturday just to continue up that bit of momentum they had from getting 2-2 against the Glens. They'll take into this game. I think they'll go behind quite early. I've talked about how this Carrick side are difficult to get in behind, but Loughgall know of one way of breaking down teams, and it's about tiki taka, move it around. Oh. And I think they'll just move it around this side and they'll break free. And you know what? If you're going to go with the fire, in this analogy of the brawn of the Carrick Rangers trio of Crow and McCullough and co. Nathaniel Ferris will just see that as a battle of the Titans. He'll get stuck involved. Francis will get in fighting for corners. So I could see this being a tricky little 3-2 to Carrick, where we'll all go, Loughgall scored 2 goals. Maybe they're in, they're out, they're about it. However, they'll not get the result. Another big victory for Carrick. Nice little run they've been on if they keep up with a nice result on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think they will, and I think something similar to what you were saying. I think it'll be a decent enough game. But I do have Carrick coming out just on top. I would say probably 2-1.
Just for full clarity, I have Carrick edging this by a goal. I'll say 2-1. And I think if that happens, we're then into serious conversations about is that curtains for Loughgall?
I think no. It's only because Glenavon are just so questionable in how that game against Glentoran could have swapped things so much, especially going into the split. If it's anywhere around the 7 point mark, it could all come together. I think you start to think that. I think you're in one loss here and you're out. It's when you're at 7 points and you're just not at that yet. It can be clawed back at, and I don't know if Loughgall are really going to be able to improve their side in January, but get a few players back. They're tricky. I think they just need to start showing up from an attacking point of view. You'll forgive the odd goal at the back, but I think if they can sort it out going forward, then they can approach games differently at the back, because they're offering nothing going forward in recent games before that Glentoran game, and then they're trying to claw back games, and that was never a good position for them. Linfield Coleraine, outside of that mad Tuesday night earlier on in the year, late last season, has this ever been a thriller?
No, it's not, it's definitely not one that excites me whatsoever. Although, as I said earlier, Linfield have been really poor when I've seen them, and they just keep getting away with it. But I think this is maybe where it's gonna catch them. Per performance and result, obviously in the cup there. So I think Coleraine are they're gonna come down. They're gonna actually get something out of this, and I think it could be a bit embarrassing for Linfield. I'm gonna say 3-1. Well, 1-3. Sorry.
Wow, I cannot see that at all. Is he making you feel sad, Ross, or
He's
angry?
got the fire in my belly. That has been clipped up and played in the changing room beforehand. I think we'll win just because it's two pretty bad lots. But I feel like we've got Corian's number. So I'm gonna say 2-0.
0-0 for me, sadly. I know I just said it's very unusual, but Linfield have kind of drifted into that zone recently. A lot of people talk about how they were lucky against the Ports, and I could see them maybe drift through the first half, and then the second half, unless they sneak that goal in the same way they did against the Mid Ulster side, it could just drift. And I don't know if Coleraine have that true attacking abandon to go out and just give it a go and put it to Linfield, which I think is maybe the best way to do it, but we'll see. I think I'll be 0-0. Final game of the weekend, at least that we're going to be talking about, Shamrock Park. Ports against the Reds. How are you feeling, Joe?
A bit nervy.
I think the pitch is going to have a factor in how this is played.
Yeah, I agree. It's very different to what we're used to as well. I am worried about this one. I'm certainly not confident. Coming off the game against Larne, I think we're going to really be up for it because we were good that day, but we just did not take our chances whatsoever, and we'll let it come back to bite us. So I think we're really going to be up for it, but it just that almost worries me more because like if you're up for it against Portadown, they will just match you. They'll just come back with the exact same energy, and I could end up seeing it being a real feisty game.
Who's likely to come in for Alice because he'll still be suspended, will he not?
He will be, yeah, he will be. So that's another real interesting thing about what way we're going to line out. That hadn't actually crossed my mind, which worries me even more, if I'm honest with you.
Does that not say how people just don't see Portadown this year as a bit of a tricky side, but actually someone that can cause everybody in the league trouble? It wasn't as much as Cliftonville had pushed their authority against Port's first game of the season, which feels like forever ago. It's not like you completely had your way with them, and they did stand firm. They weren't the side that we know today, but they've got big results against Linfield, Glentoran, Larne, Crusaders, everybody bar Cliftonville. So especially at Shamrock Park, no one's had an easy ride there.
No, well, they kind of play with 12 men at Shamrock Park with those ball boys
That
that
is
did as
true.
well. So they seem to wind up every team. So I'm not looking forward to that either. Having to have, I got to laugh at it last time I was there. I'll not be laughing this time when the ball boys are throwing the balls at people and throwing them away and wasting time. And that's it. They just feel like disruptors. Like they're doing really well, obviously, Portadown, but like first and foremost, disruptors, and they love it, and they love to get off for those games. So I'm really nervous for it.
I think it's a moment, Ross, where Cliftonville can kind of say, all right, guys, this is top flight football here, all right? I appreciate you're getting the best of other people, but we come in, we play football, and we will rip this exciting back line to shreds with pass, cross tapping at the back.
Well, if they lose by a couple of goals, they'll be below Portadown, and Cliftonville don't need that. I don't need that living with Jack. There's one Portadown fan only going to give his name out, give him the satisfaction. He keeps bringing up my Portadown to finish 12th prediction, which I'm worrying about a little bit now.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it's like you left your headphones on the train. Just get over it. It was 3 weeks ago. It's that kind of like move on, son.
I've ruled that one out in my head, but I think there's almost a bit of a disservice being done to Portadown in that they're getting this reputation as being passion merchants, like they're sort of like a Wimbledon crazy gang sort of thing. They actually play like a nice bit of football, and like Shane McCartan wasn't even brought up in our conversation earlier. Cracking player. If he adds a few more goals, he's going to be in a conversation. It's I have been burnt at Shamrock Park this season. It's it's no gimme. I've backed Cliftonville to win, but they'll know they've been in a game afterwards.
Yeah, I don't know. My gut tells me 2-1 Cliftonville. However, I've bet against Portadown like 4 or 5 or 6 weeks in a row, and yes, they didn't get the 3 points or a result against Linfield, but I have been hyping up this idea that Cliftonville go from the carpet to the marsh of Shamrock, and if they can get a goal early enough, which is really not their vibe at all, what could happen? Cliftonville, it's just that weird game against Lauren says to me that they'll live in fear late on and could get caught out from that. So actually, I'm going to go against. I'm going to say 1-1 in this game. I feel like I'll regret it and go it is 2-1 at the end. I just think surely Joe Gormley's record against a side like Portadown is rather good.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think for me, unfortunately, I just can't see past the 2-2 at the moment. I just, I'm, I'm worrying myself the more I'm talking about it as well. But I think, um, yeah, I'm gonna say 2-2. I'm probably Gormley to score them both.
I've got Cliftonville 1-0, Gormley 75-80 direction. Break Portadown Hearts.
Yeah, I can't see Cliftonville absolutely battering them, but I can see it maybe being a disappointment where both teams think they should have won, but ultimately Cliftonville were the only team that did. So we'll see. I think I've said last week how for a lot of teams, big things could happen over the next few weeks. Losing that game, that set of games last week, kind of scuppers that ever so slightly. But Cliftonville, as much as they seem far out from the title, they'll want to keep sniffing around, and they also don't want, as maybe, I don't remember, did you describe them, or you maybe insinuated these pretenders like Portadown, even thinking that they're in a close march near them. A win for Portadown kind of changes the complexion of everything, doesn't it? But we'll look forward to that. I think that's probably the game of the weekend. Got to give a big shout out to Jay, who comes in with a late team. Maybe he's been like listening into what we've been talking about. He's went for Yolai, McCullough left back, Frankie Vid centre back, McCallion, Amos right back. Controversial. Sule at the bottom of a pivot, Miller and Cooper as a part of a midfield three. And then he did what we were discussing, offered Gormley and Shevlin, offered a left striker, Shevlin as a right striker, and Gormley just as a centre forward striker. So again, we're playing with high value tokens, I think, to try and make it work. But hey, that's us. And guys, another big episode without a single game to talk about, but we had our fun, didn't we?
Absolutely.
We made it
Brilliant as
work.
always.
I believe this will be the last time I'll be chatting to you in podcast form between now and Christmas. Any big plans? Just the usual?
The usual, and then just once it hits about 6 o'clock on Christmas night, just start thinking about the next day and the joys that will no doubt hold.
As, like I said, Storm Miller finally comes and has us all panicking about, are we going to have games on Boxing Day? Broadly, I know you guys, I joke that you're all 12, but like, it's something that's kind of gone underneath the radar, and I'll probably talk about in future podcasts. But the end, or the supposed end of the New Year's Day game, would you have seen that as a great loss, or as a big deal, or do you go, you know what, I'd probably far rather have a game in between Christmas and New Year's than waiting until after Boxing Day? That's pretty much the final game of 2020, of whatever year, I guess.
Yeah, I don't overly mind, to be honest. The Boxing Day is the big one for me. I think it's nice to have those two games, the New Year's Day followed it, as two big occasions. But to me, I don't overly mind.
No one's at anything in that wee window. Time doesn't exist, so you might as well have, I think it's Lauren Linfield in there to tie you over to the new year. Perfect.
That is the game, isn't it? And I'll get round to that, no doubt, in this podcast. Fellas, been a joy. How are we doing on Christmas shopping?
Would rather not talk about it.
I'm all done. On the other hand, I can't wait.
Well, can I recommend anybody that hasn't sorted out a Christmas gift? So Kicking Match Live is happening, just in case you don't remember, on the 21st of March. And you know what would feel really cool if you're one of the first people to get a ticket. Guys, I've heard the tickets are on sale right now from Eventbrite. Is that true?
I have heard that, and I've heard they are going like hotcakes. Mainly
That's
because
what we're hoping.
I just bought 8 for my extended family.
That's what we're hoping. There's a limited amount of tickets, so if they somehow go and they're gone, just remember I said follow and subscribe to the podcast. You're the first one to listen, because sometimes I'll drop news like the first ever live show. Guys, I will 100% see you before then. Looking forward to it. You and everybody else. Genuinely, if you do buy tickets, tweet out. I will appreciate that. Saying that though, I'll be able to see who's bought tickets anyway, so it's fine. Guys, have a lovely festive period. All the best.
Enjoy, Peter. Glad tidings.
And yourself, Peter. Merry Christmas.
Yes, end of the program. I've got a new thing to plug. Usually it's at Kicking Match on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's make sure you follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your podcast player is. Main page. Just hit follow, subscribe. It's free. You're in. You get a notification. Pretty handy today if you were right on this podcast and you wanted to get tickets for the live show ASAP Rocky. But look, yeah, I've said it like twice already. Kicking Match Live, it's a thing. March, Friday the 21st next year. You're going to hear that date so many times every single week. So why put it off? Why worry about it? go to the Kick a Match Twitter, whatever page. You'll see in the bio, there'll be a link, and go grab yourself and a friend, your family, everyone. Bring the whole gang, and let's have some crack. And I might have a frame picture of Lee Bonus just on the side of the stage. That'll be my first bit of furniture for this. You never know. Thank you for all the support, if you're new or old or kind of in the middle. Cheers. Let's hope there's some games to talk about next week. I don't know what I would talk about, unless maybe we can do this all over again. Let's find out. Until next time, tally ho.